Okay. And I have a few announcements. I know that some of you who hear these announcements will say, I've heard this before, but it's always a good reminder, especially for the new people. The modules are independent. I want to stress that again. So one of the good, I think that's a strength of the Academy modules. So the sessions are independent. They stand alone. This is not something that you need to build on. So if you don't listen to sessions 3 or 4 or 5, you can still listen to session 6 or 7. Not only are they sessions independent of each other, but the lessons are independent of the sessions of the month. So for example, this month we have the Gottman method summary of that framework. And I want to talk a little more about that actually today, if I have the time, but it's independent of the content of the session. So the lessons are independent of the sessions, and each module is independent of the other. And you have access to all of them. It's just that every month I only talk about the module of the month. I also want to remind you that if you're an Illinois-based subscriber, you can take a quiz every month. And when you take the 12 quizzes, you can get 18 credit hours of CEUs. I also want to remind you that there are available materials. The stages of the treatment of the stages of a couples therapy treatment process is available on the site. And also the stages of development of a couples therapist is available on the site. I say this every month, but I like to remind people who are behind or who don't have time to do everything, but at least you should consider, I strongly recommend that you consider reading every once in a while those 2 documents, because they will help you assess where you're at in terms of your own development as a couples therapist and what else needs to happen. And then as you see me doing that in the sessions, then you'll be able to add to your repertoire. So, okay, I think that's about it in terms of announcements. Oh, one more. So in addition to that, I have been writing blogs, and this is also available to you on the site, not on the subscribers, but on the site, on the Academy site. There's a section called blogs, and there's a lot of blogs that are interesting, that are not, the content of which is not on the Academy modules. Some is, but a lot of it isn't. So, and the PDF document of the lesson. So in every module, there's one session, one lesson, and the PDF document of the lesson. In the PDF document of the lesson, there are implementation tasks that might help you to figure out where to go next in terms of your own development as a couples therapist. Okay, having said that, thank you for joining me. I was saying to Joan and to Michael that I am considering not recording these anymore, and people will either attend them live or not. But I'm thinking about it, and I haven't made a decision yet. I just wanted to let you all know. So Michael or Joan, since you're the only ones here, I wonder if you have any comments or questions about the session that you heard or about the lesson that you heard. And I hate to put you on the spot, since, but you may have something that you want to say, or you may have a question or two.
Well, yeah, I jotted down some questions. This, where I am, anything that we're doing is so helpful because I'm just starting out. So yeah, this whole discernment counseling, that was one of my questions, because I get all kind of emails about, do I want to join some discernment counseling program? And I really wanted to come to you and to hear your thoughts. And so it was wonderful to watch this session play out. It was wonderful, but it was also grueling. very grueling.
Oh, so painful.
Yeah, really so painful. So much defensiveness, at least that's what I saw. And I guess my first comment is on her first comment, which I think she says something like, if there's a 1% chance of reconciliation or communication, like that she'd like to do that. And I guess, I don't know why, but I was sensing so much in her defensiveness. I was sensing so much of her desire to just like kind of like encapsulate all her emotions. You know, she could have said, oh, I really, you know, I had a change of heart in this. I've realized this or something emotional, and she didn't. She just very matter of factly said, there's 1% chance I would like to go there, but if not, I'll deal with the divorce. I'll do. Oh, and so, yeah, that seems like it was how the whole session kind of played out, but that's my first comment, I guess.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I should say, I don't know if this helps people to know that this is a couple that I had been working with on setting up a separation agreement, because after the discernment, they decided to do a separation agreement, and I helped them do a nesting separation agreement. And this is a couple that when they first came in, she's the one who wanted the separation and he's the one who was hesitating, and then she flipped. And so you can see some of her flip here, and some of what you're absolutely right that, you know, you're sensing so much more than what she's saying. That's true of both of them, actually. All right. But in part, it's because she is very anxious and very undifferentiated, but also because she had a change of heart, so she was a little ashamed of it. So in answer to your first question about should you join the program discernment, let me talk a little more about discernment, separation, divorce, and then we'll see if I can answer specifically that one. Okay. So let me put that off for a minute. Do you, Michael, have any other questions, or do you, John, have any other questions other than that one? Let's go to Michael first.
I don't have any questions, but I just in agreement of how grueling it was. You could tell how much he was really trying towards the second half of the session. The first half of the session, it felt like he was really concrete and kind of just stuck in opening up. It was interesting to see how you kind of shifted them into a different conversation, however, very painful for both of them. It's, you know, difficult to uncouple and really kind of express that and be vulnerable with each other. So I appreciate the work. So thank you.
Yeah, so so let me just say that in the video of the prior year from this Zoom call, there is a section on how to do discernment. I call it a short-term process, where I do a joint session with the both of them, talking about their divorce narrative and their marriage narrative and how they got to where they are. Then I do 2 individual sessions with each, and then I do a last joint. So it's a 5, 6, or 7, 1 or 2 last joint sessions before deciding whether to engage in couples therapy, whether to engage in a separation agreement or a divorce agreement, or whether to not engage me at all. Nowadays, I'm doing a lot of separation. I'm doing a lot of discernment, and then I don't take the case, even if they want to engage in couples therapy. So that's been happening quite a bit, but that's my personal choice. I mean, you can engage in what I think you cannot do. This is what I want to stress today again, even though part of this is in the video of last year. I want to stress that what you cannot do is call the work couples therapy, because when two people come in with an ambivalent stance, meaning I don't know if I should stay or go, or when they come in when one wants the marriage to work and the other one doesn't. So in those two scenarios, when there's either ambivalence or one is wanting the marriage to work on the marriage and the other one doesn't, or the other one is ambivalent, you cannot treat this as two people who are motivated to do the work, which is how I define couples therapy. When two people are committed to making the necessary changes to the interactional pattern of the dynamics so that they can improve the relationship. When that is not there, I cannot assume, and that's part of the work of the very beginning, that you are assessing their motivation for working. And if you're assessing ambivalence or different agendas, I would not call what you're doing couples therapy. You don't have to call it discernment, but at least don't call it couples therapy. You can say, we're going to try to figure out what we do. I see that you're not on the same page. Let's see if you can be on the same page. And then you separate them right away. You work with each of them individually to try to clarify the agenda, to try to clarify what they want, and then to try to get them to say something about what they want in a joint session. So I can give you two examples of a recent case of discernment that I'm just finishing, where it was identified that the male partner was engaging in some coercive behaviors, and the female partner was engaging in some distancing, withdrawal, and passive behaviors. And so, of course, he complained about her passivity. She complained about his coercion. And so I worked really, really hard with him to try to help him identify. I didn't call him coercive from the beginning, but I ended up using that word and he didn't disagree with it. When I explained that what he was trying to do was a form of connection that wasn't working for him. In other words, I told him that he was engaged in behaviors because of his desperation for connection, and that when he got desperate, he became somewhat, and then I gave him a choice: forceful, coercive. You tried to convince her that you're right. You tried to convince her to want, the same, whatever. And in trying to convince her, you go a little overboard. What word would you use? Is coercion a good word? And he agreed. So then with her, she was only wanting to talk about his coercion, and she was talking about his abuse. He called it abuse. I didn't call it abuse. But she called it abusive behavior. And I was focusing on, this is really, really hard to do, especially with women who are the subject of the coercive behavior. And I was really focusing on her way. How does she respond to the coercion? And so she responds to the coercion by withdrawing, by becoming passive, by escaping. And essentially those are her withdrawal mechanisms and her survival strategies. And I was just trying to see if she could articulate to him the ways in which she hadn't been a good partner for him. So I know this may be a controversial thing to do, especially when the coercive partner is the male partner. But I did it anyway, because I knew that unless she acknowledged the ways in which she wasn't a good partner for him, his level of motivation to work on it wouldn't rise. So, and she did it. And so I had a last discernment session where each of them recognized the ways in which they hadn't been good partners for the other. And that's how I see my work in the discernment process. You can call it what it's a process that helps you prepare people for the work. I don't know that I do anything different in a non-discernment process. I always try to do two things: to take into consideration the complaint of the partner about the other, while at the same time telling them, you know, I get your complaint, but unless you focus on the ways you're showing up because of that complaint, I'm not going to be able to help you. So, and the reason I'm telling you all this is to summarize a little bit that while discernment process is a distinct process, it is in some ways no different than all the other work we do with couples. And I also wanted to say this by way of introducing the idea of doing separation or divorce counseling. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that because once you prepare couples for the work, you know, about half of them who come in not knowing what to do, they end up wanting to get separated. And so I think we play a crucial role in helping couples to make choices that are not self-destructive or destructive for the children if they have children, when there is the desire to end the relationship. And traditionally, the couples therapist was not one who either wanted to engage in that work, or the couples themselves think of a couples therapist as someone who only helps if they want to save their relationship, and then they stop coming if what they want is to separate or divorce. And I've been working really, really hard, both clinically and in my trainings, to help couples therapists realize that they can and need to play a huge role in helping couples separate better. And that I know, you know, what I struggle with is in selling this, because I tell people, you know, it's hard to tell people, okay, I can do marriage counseling, and then if you decide to get divorced, I can do divorce counseling. You know, it's hard to do that. But I do say to people that regardless of what's going to happen with the relationship, whether they decide to stay together, or whether they decide to separate or divorce, they still need to interact differently with each other to solve problems. And so I say that to them, and then it's become easier for them not to drop me if they go the separation route. So just to give you an example, I'm working with a couple who did not come in saying they wanted to separate or divorce. They said they wanted to get better. And so we've been working on that with ups and downs, not very successfully. This one has a dynamic called mother accuses, adolescent son withdraws. That's the dynamic that they have. She's very accusatory, quite coercive, and he reacts by defending, apologizing, withdrawing, looking at the phone, you know, so it's sort of the opposite of the other. So this is a very, very common dynamic nowadays in my practice, the aggressive woman and the passive guy in terms of heterosexual couples. So, but then, you know, 3 months later, there is a quote unquote incident where he does something. It's not exactly cheating, but anyway, she thinks of it as cheating, and there is a cheating element on it because he lied about it. I think they went to I don't even know what they're called, the bars where the women are dancing naked, and I forget, strip club, like something like that. They went to he and his work buddies went to a strip club. And so, so she says, I'm done. And so that's when I started my speech, so, okay, so let's say that that's what you want. And so in the past, a couples therapist would have said, okay, let me give you a referral to an attorney. Or the couple would have said, we're done working with you. And I am now maneuvering the situation so that they don't leave, because I can help them separate, and I can help them with what they each want, even if they want different things. So then in this case, we started sort of a discernment. So she wanted to be done. He didn't want to be done. So we had some discernment kinds of sessions, individually, both individually and together. And I talked with her about, I can help you. You might need to learn to do things and say things a little bit differently, even if you want to separate. So where would he go? Where would you go? Where would the kids live? What would you do so I have a separation agreement blueprint, and I know what are the terms of the separation agreement. And I say to people that that divorce is a project and a process. It's not, you don't get divorced by filing a divorce. And we have a big role to play in how couples get divorced, in what they do to get divorced, in how they pick a lawyer, in how they talk about their financial and parenting issues. Big role. We can't leave it to the attorneys. This is our job. And so this is a shift in the couples therapy field, a shift from 20 years ago, even 15 years ago, where we are working. We can play a huge role in helping couples in this transition. So I'm going to stop now, because I wanted to say a few things about discernment, about separation, about divorce, and there's very little training about it. So the training that you're alluding to, Joan, where you get emails about discernment, they're really good. They probably come from a guy from Minnesota, from the Couples of the Brink Project, on the Brink Project, Bill Doherty. It's a wonderful program. You can, enroll in it if you want. You could also read his articles and read his materials. I can send you the discernment counseling protocol that I describe in the video from last year, and I can send that to you. That's available online. And in fact, I might be able to post that on the site. So, okay. And then you can decide. Do you have any other questions about your question about joining a program for discernment?
Can I just ask a quick question regarding, so how you're talking about the need for, this discernment, you say they decide they want a divorce. How do you handle it if one person decides, yeah, I'm out, and the other person just kind of refuses to give up and doesn't want to give up that hope? Then what do you do?
That's a really, really good question. It happens a lot. So I think it's a reflection of their inability to problem solve, negotiate, and collaborate when both want different things. This is usually one more example of their inability to solve problems when they disagree. So it's not surprising that both want different things. And so this is what the discernment protocol is so good for, because it helps you work with the leaning in as different from working with the leaning out. So And I'm going to try to be very succinct about it. So, and say a little more about what you do with the leaning in. So I already said this is a metaphor for their inability to negotiate, solve problems in a collaborative way. So this, for example, is when, let's say in a heterosexual couple, she says, I'm done, like in the one I was just telling you. And he says, what? You want to throw away 20 years of marriage? You're crazy. What are we going to do? You want me to not see the children? So he's completely adamant, completely against it, and completely coercive in either his coercive behavior or his begging behavior. So you have to assess, does he have coercive behavior? Does he have begging behavior? And whatever it is, part of the counseling process is to help him figure out what to do differently, because you can show him, you can ask him what his intentions are. Are your intentions to get her closer to you, or are your intentions to get her to go away from you? And he will say, my intentions are to get her closer to me. And I will say, how is it going? Are you achieving your goals by doing what you're doing, whether it's begging behavior, whether it's coercive behavior? So generally, and I'm going to give you an example of another case I've been doing discernment counseling with. He was engaging in both a combo of begging and coercive behaviors and dismissive. And it turns out that he was coercive or dismissive whenever he disagreed with her about spending, about in-laws, about, right? So usually what you could see is a history of not able to do something in a collaborative way. And so when you show him that, I say to him, I cannot guarantee that she will respond in a way that you want to if you change the way you're acting with her. But I can guarantee that what you're doing is having the exact opposite effect of what you want. So that's the gist of the counseling with the leaning in partner, to assess his or her coercion or begging behavior, as Michelle Weiner Davis calls it, and then to see if he can change tactics, at least for the time being. Yeah. So the other thing I wanted to say is that in the heterosexual couples, the women are the majority of the ones who initiate complaints. And the women are the ones who initiate divorces. In the United States, in heterosexual couples, the divorces are initiated by women most of the time. And so what you generally have is a woman who says, I'm done, I can't take this anymore, I don't want to live like this. And you have a guy who says, I can't believe you. Why is this so terrible? I didn't realize it was so terrible. And the more he says that, the worse it gets for her. So that's the other thing you're trying to assess, not just the coercion and the begging, but also the dismissal. So there's been a history of her complaining over a 20-year period. And what you hear a lot is, I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't know that she was so unhappy, which sends her in a rage, because she's been saying that and she's been felt not heard, not seen, dismissed for such a long time. And now he's actually saying it. I didn't know it was so bad. I didn't realize. And so what I say is, yes, you didn't realize how fragile your marital bonds are. But the reality is the marital bonds are really fragile in the United States in the last 50 years. And then I talk about why that is if they're interested. Anyway, so I just wanted to say it's not just an assessment of coercion and begging behavior. It's also an assessment of his inability to understand the fragility of the bond, and that she has been sounding the alarm for a very long time that he's been ignoring. And we could talk about why men ignore the alarm that women sound, but that's a different issue. That's a gender issue that I feel we don't talk enough about in the academy master classes, so maybe I'll do that someday. Okay, so anything else about the session? Anything else? It was grueling. It was a very slow start. It was painfully slow. I mean, I can't even hear it myself. I couldn't believe how painfully slow the session started until we got to the meat of it.
I have another question. When you were having them state their goals, and you were having the husband state his goals, and he stated a goal. It was kind of long-winded and a little bit hard to understand. And then the wife cut in and said, "Can you give an example?" And you said, "Can you hold on a second?" And I guess one of the thoughts I had was, I could just sense that you commanded, and I don't mean to use this word commanded, but in a positive way, you commanded a respect from them, and you had that respect and that relationship with them. Because when you said, "Can you hold on for a second?" Yeah, she absolutely backed off. But you said, "Can you hold on for a second?" And then you asked him, you said, "How would that look like for you?" So you kind of asked the same question she did, but you didn't seem to want her to answer it. And yeah, I just wondered about that. And I'm sorry, I should have emailed you like this question.
Don't worry about it. This is great. I'm happy that you're no problem. Right. So I do remember that part, and I will tell you that I had a couple of things in my mind, and this is why I wanted to stop her. And well, first of all, let me address the commanding. So I have what you're perceiving is a very good alliance where I am the leader. I establish myself as the leader, and they buy into that and let me do the work like that. And if I don't get that, then I can't do that. So this is a couple, remember, I've been working with, and I've already gotten permission. I think you hear that somewhere. I got permission to interrupt. I got permission to redirect. So yes, these are I have to make decisions every step of the way. A couples therapist has to make a decision when working with a couple every single minute about which way you're going to go. So I guess I could have said, go ahead, ask for an example, but I felt that he had so much trouble articulating his goal for himself and whether or not he had improved. Well, I think that came later, the improvement question. I think he had I wanted him to hear himself. That's what I was doing. I was hoping that he would be able, because I asked that several ways, and I wanted him to articulate less painfully, with more clarity, what he wanted to work on. And I think the question is a good one. Can you give an example? But at that point, she was not a very good listener. Remember, he said, I want to be able to talk without being afraid of how she will react. That's his goal, because she reacts negatively. So, and I knew that, and that was her goal. So I knew that the question comes out of a place of anxiety, and I needed her to be able to listen to him without getting anxious. So I did it on purpose, so she could hear him and tolerate what he's saying without getting
Yeah.
bent out of shape. And my other goal was to him to articulate and take his time without the pressures of her question.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I decided to do. But you could have made a different decision. You know, we make decisions about what to do all the time. You have to have a vision about where you want to take them before the session. And whether or not you go there is a decision you make in the middle of the session. You may derail your goal, you may change your mind, you may go in a different direction. But what you want to try to do is not get derailed by their attempt at derailing you, which is what they do a lot of. You know, couples will attempt to derail you. So that's why you have to establish a very strong leadership position from the get-go, which is it's a very different position than to work with individuals. Very different.
You know what? And I also liked, and this was towards the end of the session, because, you know, she started out by saying about that 1% chance if you wanted to, blah, blah. But it kind of, it seemed to me anyway, like it continued to kind of resurface and kind of build throughout the session, because she kind of wouldn't let go of it. And she was asking it in different ways. Like, I just need to know, what would that look like? When would it be if you wanted to reconcile? And towards the end, you said, she's not having it. Like, and you just kind of called her out on that. And I thought that was really good too, because she wasn't having it. She just kind of wanted to, I don't know what, like, get an answer that she was comfortable with. And he kept saying he didn't know, and that wasn't good enough. And you just kind of summed it up when you said she's not having it. And again, she took that, you know, she accepted that. And I think because of respect that she has for you.
Right. And I also think that I helped her articulate what the real question was, which was, what do you really want to know? What you want to know is he ready to divorce and hasn't told you that? And you don't, you know, because he already gave you this answer 2 or 3 times before, you're not hearing it. So yeah. But I felt the contrast between the first part of the session and the second part. I think I wasn't sure where to go. I think that's what I'm thinking that happened the first time. The first half of the session, I was so slow, and they were painfully unclear, but I was painfully slow, because I think that's a reflection of me not knowing what to do in that session. Michael, I don't know if you thought that too.
Yeah, I felt like the development of the treatment goals, I was like, I'm thinking the pacing is wrong, but we can't see the video, so I'm not quite sure what's happening. If perhaps one is becoming tearful and you're giving them space. Going back to sort of the therapeutic alliance and the rapport that you have with them, for sure it was there. I was thinking of a moment where you were asking her for her treatment goals, and then she became other focused, meaning she really focused on what he would then be doing or changing, and you really redirected it. It was quite simple of like, that's not what I was really looking for in terms of a treatment goal, like not what he's what you want him to do, but more so what you'll be working on. And she really kind of allowed you back in to kind of redirect her at that point. So it's evident that they're trusting of you in the process and need you to kind of nudge them back once in a while. And so
yeah. And in the beginning, I think it's not just painful because of how difficult. I mean, they are very, very adept. They're a lot better now. I'm still working with them, unbelievably, 2 years later. They're a lot better now, but they were painfully unable to state their own goals, their own wishes. It was really, really tough. But I think I was struggling with not knowing what to do other than what I was doing. And I was hearing the lack of clarity, and I didn't want to criticize them. And I wanted to praise some of the progress they were making in the beginning, which is, which leads me to the talking about Gottman for a second. And I don't know if you have any questions and any more questions or comments about the session. So thank you for all the comments and the questions. Let me know if you have any more before we move on to, well, do you want me to talk a bit more about separation and divorce counseling, or do you want me to talk a little more about Gottman? Or maybe we could do both. Or do you have any other questions or comments about the session?
No questions or comments. I'd like to talk about Gottman, if that's okay. And I have to go at 12. I
Okay.
forgot to say anything.
Okay, let's go to Gottman first, and then maybe I'll talk more about interventions to prepare couples to engage in a separation discussion and or divorce. So, well, do you have any specific questions about Gottman, or do you want me to tell you what I had in my mind to talk about when I was thinking about talking about Gottman? Do you have any specific questions about that?
No, I guess just a general question in terms of how I feel like my work is more integrative with different approaches, and I struggle sometimes because Gottman then lends itself to a little bit more directive. It feels almost homework based for couples, and I work through that on my own, and so like how I balance that out. And I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about your approach and how you might balance it out. And I don't know if that was the direction you were thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really good. Do you, Joan, have any questions?
I think you're going to talk about it. The one was all of the assessment and tests and papers and questionnaires that they have, and then you say I integrate assessment throughout. So just your thoughts on their assessment process and where you, yeah.
Okay.
Divert from that.
Okay, so thank you. Let me say it this way. So I think couples are fascinated by the results of the Gottman team's research. So as part of my psychoeducation in the beginning of a treatment process, or somewhat in the middle, if I have to go back to it, when a couple is in really bad shape, so part of what you're assessing when you're working with the couple is, are they in moderate distress or high distress? You're assessing lots of other things, but one of the things you're assessing is how bad of a shape are they in, and how much damage have they done to each other. The longer a couple has been together and the less they have been able to solve problems when they disagree or are disappointed, the more damage there is. So I believe that one of the things they are interested is in hearing what predicts divorce. And essentially what I tell them, this is I'm not going to tell you exactly how I do it, because I do it differently depending. I'll give you a couple of examples of how I do it, but essentially what I'm trying to do is tell them, this is what predicts divorce, and you're showing all the signs of it. So, and that leads you to either comments or assessments about, the attack defense, the attack withdrawal, the cascading of, that ends in stonewalling and complete withdrawal. So, what we see are profoundly disconnected couples. And that means they are in the last stage very often. Now, we don't know, let's say that they are in high distress, that they've been together for many years, and that there's been a lot of hurt and a lot of damage. So therefore, you have to share with them, this is what leads to divorce. There's a profound disconnection. They haven't had sex in 2 years. They don't feel like they're good friends anymore. They are completely disengaged. They can't have a problem-solving conversation without getting bent out of shape and in lower brain. They can't have a conversation without attacking or withdrawing. And so that's part of what you're telling them. You're giving them the facts. And that comes out of the Gottman research team. And you can do it in a number of ways. I try not to be the one naming the behavior. I try to show them a list of behaviors so they can tell me what they do. And so I'll say, okay, so when you do this, when you yell, when you call her names, when you, that's a predictor of divorce. And then let's say she'll say, I go in the other room, I get away, I haven't had sex in 2 years, I withdraw, I look at my phone, I don't pay attention and dismiss what he says. Then I say that's predictor of divorce. I have them name it, and then I tell them that's a predictor of divorce. And I tell them that so in part, this is to lower the expectations about what I can do. I am not a magician. I'm not going to be able to turn this around. The only way to turn this around is with using very small and baby steps. And this is another concept of Gottman that I integrate, which is the friendship buildup, the building of the friendship. So the Gottman's beautiful explanation of the sound, what does he call it? The sound relationship house. You can have them, the sound relationship house has communication, respect, kindness, collaboration, trust. What else? Remind
love.
me.
It's the love maps, fondness and admiration.
Yeah, right.
Turning towards each other.
Exactly. So
Sorry.
they don't turn towards
I have
each
memorized
other.
it, and it's ingrained in my head.
They don't turn towards each other.
Trying.
They don't have a fondness of admiration. You show them what it is they don't have, and then they're not letting. But what I show them is dependent on what they're coming in with. So, it's not unusual for me to say, you haven't been able to influence him. And she'll say, right, that's exactly right. You got it. I have not been able to influence him. And that is a Gottman concept that men have a harder time allowing the female's partners to influence them. In a same-sex relationship, that works a little bit differently. But if you have 2 men, maybe that is the issue. Neither one of them can influence the other. When you have 2 women, that's a little bit different because women have a higher tolerance for negativity than men do. So 2 women may go overboard in trying to talk things over and never get to a solution either. So, but it shows up differently. And so in every couple, it shows up differently. So you can apply the concepts of Gottman in their interaction as you get to know them better. For example, repair attempts. Gottman says that it's not so much the negative interactions. It's, well, first of all, it's a ratio of positive to negative interactions, but it's also the repair attempts. Do people have repair attempts? Do they know how to repair? Do they have effective repair attempts? How do they attempt to repair, and how is it received by a partner? So that's a Gottman concept. And if I see that that's a problem in the relationship, here's the predictor of divorce, and here's what you don't have. This may be the basis of our goal construction, individual goals and what to do. So that's kind of how I do it. I don't know if I'm answering your question about integrating it in the assessment, Michael.
You are.
I have the concepts ingrained in my brain too, and they're always good to remember, because I don't always remember them, and I can use them to which is, so let me just go from the way I do it in terms of assessing, and then what I do with that is that if I assess there's no friendship, there's no my question, which is it's directly coming from the Gottman materials, I say, do you ever spend time together in the same room without screens or without the children? That comes out of the Gottman stuff. And you wouldn't be surprised that 95% of the couples I work with say no. So before you could do any repair, before you can work on the 4 horsemen, before you can work on anything, you got to get them in the same room together. And for couples who are moderately distressed or on the lower end of high distress, this would be a wonderful intervention. So a couples therapy session is one of the basic units of couples interaction. Can they spend an hour in the same room together, having a decent and civil conversation? And when they do that, they can transfer that to their home. So they can practice doing that a little more often without you. So did I address, I forgot if I wrote down your question, Joan. Did you have a question about Gottman?
Thank you both. Thank you.
Bye.
You pretty much, yes, you did, because I had kind of asked, the difference between doing all the Gottman assessments versus how you integrate. I guess
right.
my remaining question is, for someone who's brand new, would you suggest just to stay on course, that those assessments, like, have you did you used to do them and you've just kind of gotten away from them, or it's, yeah.
Yeah, good question. For someone who's new, who doesn't have training in doing couples work, and I don't know what your situation is, but for someone who's new at doing couples work, who doesn't have much training, who didn't take many classes in grad school about doing couples work, I would do it.
Okay.
I would do the basic Gottman training.
You told me that at one point, and I just finished it. So I did the level 1.
Oh, okay.
So my next question is, they emphasize that level 2 is all towards affair. Well, a big part of it is towards affairs. And they seem to indicate that there is a different way of approaching this kind of situation. Would you recommend level 2, or?
I haven't done it, so I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, it's not cheap, and but I'd like to do it. I'm not sure.
I think that some of the colleagues I know and some of the people I supervise who have done it find it very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And again, if you're new at doing this work and you don't have any other framework under your belt, I would do level 1 and level 2. That might be a great way to go.
Thank you.
My only criticism of Gottman is that, and they might not say, and I say that in the lesson, they might not say that this is a fair criticism. And maybe it's because I don't know enough about
Mhm.
their framework. But I find their interventions more suited for couples who've been together for not a very long time, for couples who've been together where the level of distress is moderate to on the low end of high. And I'm not saying I have the formula about how to assess that. I'm just in
Right.
general, right?
Right. Yeah.
You can see the couple in module 7 are highly distressed,
Right.
right? They
Right.
can't be in the same room together without getting extremely anxious. So that's a high level of distress. So I would say Gottman alone for a very high level of distress is not enough. But for everything else, it's amazing. The tools are amazing. The concepts are amazing. Couples love to hear about that. When you have to do psychoeducation, it's the best. And and the other thing is that they can learn the tools that are in the interventions about what makes relationships succeed or fail. I mean, they're wonderful. And you can help them with that. It's really, really, it's cool. It's just not enough for highly distressed couples when there's lots of family of origin issues, lots of defense mechanisms and survival strategies, lots of vulnerabilities,
Right.
lots of historical trauma. Those are harder to do just with Gottman. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. And you know what? Honestly, like I read the PDF, yes, you say that was so helpful. I thought that you're under the section criticisms of government. I thought that was really, really well done. Exactly what you're saying here. But yeah, they're wonderful, but it was very helpful to see, to break down, just like you're saying, into the couples that it tends to work best with and not. And it's just like in that original article that you wrote that was in, I think, Counseling Today, and it was just all about the way you approach in the different stages and different approaches at different stages. And yeah, exactly.
Right, I was going to say, thank you for the reminder. I was going to say that the Gottman method is wonderful for the first stage of the treatment process. When you need to go a little deeper, you need to do, something a little more, something a little different.
Right.
Go to family of origin.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they don't do that. Again, this might not be fair because I haven't taken all their levels of training, but I have read most of the books and most of the materials, and I haven't seen that. So, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
So
No, yeah.
I worked with, and when I say first stage, I don't mean that you don't have to go back to the first stage. Let's say you do the first stage kind of stuff, and then you go a little deeper. Now you're doing family of origin work. Now you're doing defense mechanisms work. Now you're doing trauma work. Now you're doing survival strategy work. Now you're doing all this kind of work. And now it makes sense to go back to the first stage so that now they're ready to do repair. Now they're ready to do 5-to-1. Now they're ready to spend time together in the same room without, because you've been doing, so you do kind of need to, pivot back to what is the development of friendship. How do you heal the hurt? Well, by, doing several second stage stuff, but also by doing the kinds of by engaging in the kinds of behaviors that will be conducive to feeling more connected. And they can't do that in the first stage of so you try to get to that information, but they're not ready to do it. They're not going to be able to do it until you go through the second stage and you go deeper. Then you could go back to, okay, here's what it takes. Here's what it takes to do, what can you do to feel more connected? So I am, let's say, working with a couple on second stage now, and now they can be in the same room together without screens. They couldn't have done that in the beginning.
I can't help thinking about relating what you just said. Yeah. Just where they are, how they're able to relate to each other, to the session we just listened to, where she's saying that when she walks into a room, many times he gets up and he leaves. And to her, that signals, oh, he wants a divorce or he doesn't want. But I guess that's where I felt, oh my gosh. And you talked about having to restrain yourself and letting them talk. But, oh, I would have had such a hard time not kind of jumping in and saying, hey, you know, his lack of comfort when you walk in the room, yeah, just can stem from so much in the past that doesn't necessarily mean it's just where he's at, how he's, you know.
Absolutely. And that's what we spend a year working on. For him to be able to articulate that hurt, for her to be able to hear it. Imagine me trying to do the Gottman thing and trying to get them to talk for 20 minutes with each other without screens, asking. Yeah. Imagine her trying to do that on their own. They wouldn't have been able to do that. They would not have been able to do that because she interprets his behavior as having malign intentions, right? So she interprets his behavior in a negative way without putting herself in his shoes and understanding what did she do to hurt him so much and for him to be so afraid of her reaction. What did she do? And she did a lot. And so a lot of the work we did in second stage was to help her. Well, I use a lot of differentiation work, like, you know, in what ways, what did she do to hurt him? And from, you know, and can she put herself in his shoes and understand why he would get up and leave, as opposed to thinking that that means he wants a divorce. So that was a big part of the second stage work with her. And with him, it was a lot of what he says he wanted to do. I mean, I chose this session because it really crystallizes the work they needed to do.
Yeah.
For him, it was to be able to be clear. And he struggles so much to be clear.
Yeah.
So much. And that's what we did for about a year.
So when you heard her make that comment, you knew that, I mean, just kind of make a note of it, like, yeah, here's we need to.
Exactly.
I can't say anything now.
I did not say anything now, but I did note, and you make decisions about what to pay attention to and what to let go of. Yeah. But you do keep it, as you were saying, in the back of your mind, what she's doing, because it will come back up. She will interpret his behavior in a negative way. She will mind read. She will do, but the projection that she does, she will do it again. Yeah. And when you see it happening again, maybe it is maybe you decide at some point, okay, today I'm going to tackle that one. Because she does that all the time. That's her defense mechanism. That's her go-to. That's her undifferentiated self. So I will do a lot of work with her on that eventually. But that day I decided not to go there.
Could I ask you just in general how their progress has been? Are you?
Oh, they're doing amazingly well. So for about a year, they did a nesting separation agreement. So they moved every week. She stayed in the house and he went to a 1-bedroom, to the studio apartment. And another week, he came into the house and she went to the studio, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, they are the ones who moved to the studio apartment. They shared one studio apartment. They had a separation agreement. This will take me to say a little more about separation. So when you're working with a couple who want to engage in separation, you have a big role to play. And I start by asking them to write a personal mission statement about the good and the bad of the experiences in the marriage, the kind of person they want to be now, the ideal ways in which to handle disputes and resentments and hurts. Also, how has the relationship contributed to the person you are today? And so on. So I asked them to write a personal statement. And after they read that to each other, I give them a separation agreement, a blank separation agreement template. And I ask them to think about what they want in terms of living arrangement, parenting schedules, dog schedules, frequency and type of contact with each other, finances, communication, dating, couples therapy, yes or no, dating, yes or no, attorney, yes or no, how long. I mean, it's just a very comprehensive separation agreement. And there are in-home separations, there are nesting separations, there are outside separations. I can't tell you, since I've been focusing on separation and divorce after discernment, I've had a variety of arrangements. And people have this idea of the old-fashioned divorce where the guy is the one who leaves, the woman stays home with the children, the guy sees the children over the weekends or every other weekend. Yeah. And that model is the one that a lot of people have in their heads. And I'm here to tell them, you get to design this. It is up to you to design your separation agreement. You don't have to follow the Hollywood version of divorces and separation. You don't have to follow your parents' model for divorces and separation. Divorces don't have to be the horror show and the shit show that they generally are in the media or in their own experience. And I have to tell you, therapists who have a horror show story of divorce, or who haven't been divorced themselves, or who don't know much about divorce laws in their state, are not going to be very good guides. So I would say that part of your training would be to consider doing either a mediation training or understanding the divorce laws in your state, or having conversations with divorce attorneys, which I do a lot, so that I can help design. But my main concept, and this comes from the work of many people, that the main concept here is that nowadays the family gets to design in a collaborative way their own ways of separating and divorcing. There is no one-size-fits-all divorce. And it doesn't have to be the horror show that it was with your parents or or in the media. So there is no timing here. you know, what part of it is helping the couples deal with the anxiety. You know, let's say she wants to be done, and she's so anxious she wants to be done because she's been sounding the alarm, as I said, for so long. And now she wants to be done because she wants to get rid of the anxiety, get rid of the pain, get rid of the hurt, get rid of everything he represents for her. And that's not going to happen unless he comes on board, right? So she has to slow it down. So usually the work here is to help the one who's in a hurry to get divorced and separated to slow down, and the one who's not in agreement to begin to think about, you know, what you can, you know, what you can do. I recently told a woman who's like this, in a hurry, anxious to get it done. She wants to be done. She wants to file. I said, you know, you've been thinking about this for 20 years, but for him, this is new information. And she was like, oh, I never thought about it that way. So I think you have to give him time to adjust to the idea that this is the new plan. And also you need his input. You can't do this on your own. You're going to have to, you know, find out how many times a week he wants to see the children, how many times a week he wants to cook, how many times a week he wants to be in charge. So there's a lot we can do to work with a couple who's separating and divorcing. So I'm going to say two more things about what to do, how to prepare couples to engage in a separation discussion, which is to, in addition to everything I say, to make a list, everything I said a few minutes ago, to make a list of every fear you have about the separation process. Fears about outcomes, fears about parenting, fears about financial fears. I would start with non-financial issues, but I would definitely incorporate the financial issues. Some couples therapists don't want to do that. But I talk about money all the time with my clients. And then you walk them through the separation agreement template that has all this information. Who's going to pay the mortgage? Who's going to pay this? Who's going to pay that? So, and you could do a 3-month separation agreement, a 6-month separation agreement. So back in answer to your question, and to finish up this part, I help them do a nesting agreement where they are the ones who moved out, not the children. Children stayed in the house, because knowing what I know about divorce, the biggest challenge for children is when they have to uproot their lives and when they have to change. That's what the research shows is the hardest on the children, when they're the ones who have to begin to move. And so when I told them that, they were like, fine, no problem. We're the ones who are going to move. So they did that for about a year, and then they got rid of the apartment about a year, about a year. And they've been working with me on repair for the past year. I still don't know if they're going to make it, but they're in a much, much better place. They have matured a lot. She's really struggling with stopping her drinking. She got engaged in a very, very good individual therapy. And he is also an individual therapy doing great work and around the issues of boundaries, codependency, and how he had, you know, and so a big part of it, let's say she wanted to go out to the neighbor's house after dinner with the kids, and he would say, you know, I don't mind doing that, but I don't want to come home at 11 o'clock. And so she would, so let's, so he wouldn't have said that in the past. And she wouldn't, and she would have ignored that in the past. So now, if he says that, which is a big step for him, she'll say, okay, got it. And then he'll say, okay, at 9 o'clock, it's time, or 9:30, it's time to go home. And she'll say, okay, as opposed to, I'll do whatever I want. I'll stay as late as I want. And I don't care what you think or what you say. So there's been an enormous amount of progress in how they operate with each other.
Can I ask you, they both had their own therapists before they came to see you. And so they just stayed with those therapists? Like, what if they would have needed individual counseling and wanted to do it?
Right. Yeah, that's a very good question too. And that requires a long answer. I'm going to try to be brief. So she actually switched therapists because I didn't think the first one that she was with was, helpful. So it depends on the case. So I'm working with a case right now. She has an individual therapist. He doesn't. I believe he would benefit. But I think I do some work, some preliminary work to get them ready. And it's a process. I like to talk to the individual therapist to make sure that we're not working at cross purposes.
Okay. Yeah.
And I also like to be a little more in control when there needs to be a referral in the middle of the counseling in the couples counseling process. I want to be a little more in control. I want to be able to refer to somebody that I know will be a good fit, or I want to be able to refer to somebody. So one of the jobs of a good couples therapist is to be able to have a good referral source and a good team, so that you can refer or have dialogues with the individual therapist. If someone is not in individual therapy and I believe they could benefit from it, I have to get them there.
Okay.
So with this client, I said, you're living in the doghouse. And you are either trying to get out of the doghouse or trying to figure out how not to get in the doghouse. I said, because she's punishing him and attacking him and criticizing him. And I said, is this a familiar feeling? He's like, well, what do you mean? And I said, like, I don't know. When you were a teenager, were you often in the doghouse with your family? Or did you try to avoid being in the doghouse? And he's like, oh, like a light bulb came on. And he said, yes, I was always trying to avoid my father's wrath. And I was always trying to avoid my mother's criticisms. So, that's when we get into a little bit of a deeper work, that his withdrawal, his adolescent-like dismissal, anyway, so she's like his angry mother, and she's like his angry father, and he's acting like he did when he was 17, when he was getting in trouble for drinking or getting in trouble for staying out late or getting in trouble for grades. So a lot of guys are sort of stuck in their psychological maturity in their teenage years. It's very, very interesting. And that's the kind of work that a guy needs to do, but he's not going to get there until he and I do some work to try to identify and increase his awareness of the ways in which he's showing up in the marital, right? Until 2 months ago, when before they started working with me, he thought he had no agency. He thought he was the victim. He thought he didn't have any he didn't have anything to work on, that it was all her work, that she had to become less aggressive, that she had to become less accusatory, that she had to become less, and he's, and I'm like, I don't disagree with him. I think that's true, but I also think that they have a dynamic where, you know, she's the aggressor, but he responds in an adolescent way, which fuels her aggression, which fuels his adolescent way of responding, which fuels her aggression. So I explained that dynamic, and then now we're working on, well, where did that come from? Because I, you know, that's when I said to him, that's the day I said to him, you're always in the doghouse, or you're trying to avoid getting into the doghouse. Does that sound familiar? Which is a very good question for a couples therapist to ask once you have a good alliance, because you understand the origin of the defensive position in the dynamic.
Thank you. It's really helpful.
Oh, well, I appreciate your presence, and I'm going to stop the recording.